Brooklyn Bridge Park. That's where I work now. Who has heard of Brooklyn Bridge Park? Okay, all right. Who's been to Brooklyn Bridge Park? All right, 2 people. Well, you're definitely forgiven. It is a park that is still under construction, but it's really, really fantastic in just about every way you could ever want a park to be. And it's really, it utilizes the latest technologies. It's really forward-thinking environmental design. And we manage from both a organic perspective. The entire park is managed organically and ecologically. And I'll explain why that's important in a little bit. We try, I'll show you some slides. The park is very beautiful and it's growing in popularity. As I said, it's still under construction, but it's getting a lot of use. But besides being a city park and providing all the services that a city park provides, one of the things that is very important for us to provide is habitat for all of the other organisms, most desired, some non-desired, that live in the city, so birds and butterflies and bees. And there are ways that we manage in order to do that specifically, and I will be illuminating those ways tonight. There's also things that the designers did to design the park that also encourage that type of biodiversity. And if you took a handout, I narrowed it down to 21 easy steps that you can follow along with. So this is Long Island. It's a little known fact that it is an island. Most people forget that. And the thing that's interesting here is you can see that all the green in the surrounding area, and then look at New York City, there's Manhattan right there, and there's Brooklyn, that's where our park is. It's really, really brown. There's really, imagine you're a bird flying over that. There's really not a whole lot going on. And why would a bird really want to fly there is the question. And it is because we are part of the East Atlantic Flyway. These are all the different migratory paths of all these different birds, and you can see they just go up and down the coast and cross over right over New York City. So we have a lot of migratory bird population. The city in general has a lot of migratory bird population, so of course it behooves us to make them happy. And here's just a little further zoom in. This is where the park is right there. And you can see, imagine if you are a bird flying over, you can see these big green splotches right here. This is Central Park, this is Prospect Park, this is Greenwood Cemetery. And that's really where the birds fly. And what that is called is the green belt. And we hope to be a large green splotch. That's really our goal in the future. This is even closer of a zoom. This is our park here. We're built on reclaimed shipping piers. And I'll explain a little bit about the history. This is a Google image that was taken a couple years ago, and a lot of the park has been built that is not represented here, but this is Pier 1. This is our flagship pier. And we go all the way down to Pier 6, which is here. So there is, and the park starts right here, right there. We just bought that little space there. So we're 1.5 miles of coastal land right there. And this is a rendering of the before here. These are the shipping piers, and then the after. So we're not quite there yet, but we are in the process. The park is being designed by a firm called Michael von Valkenburg and Associates. You can see the little NVVA down there. And they're a really fantastic firm. They are one of the most ecologically sophisticated firms out there right now, and they do really cool things. They built this park in Manhattan called Teardrop Park that was surrounded by buildings, and when that park's lawn did not get enough sun, what they did was lifted the grade up and angled it towards the sun. And when that still didn't get enough sun, they put these giant solar-powered mirrors on top of buildings to shine sunlight down onto the lawn. So they do really, really fun, really neat things. They're very experimental. They're not always successful, but they definitely try. The park was originally shipping piers, as I've said, and they were built in the 1950s by the Port Authority. But by the 1960s, they fell into disuse because shipping containers came into fashion. And the ships were so large that they couldn't make it up the channel. So exactly where our park starts on Pier 6, that's exactly the depth that these very large boats can get to. So these piers really were being used. And by the 1980s, the community started advocating for a park because they knew the city was going to build something really big there unless they got a park built. And it took another decade until the 1990s until the city got on board and money started coming in. It was 2003 when the design firm was selected to build the park, and 2010 when Pier 1 actually opened. So that's 30 years from the inception just to build this park. It is the largest public works project in Brooklyn since Olmsted's Park, so it is a giant operation. It's 85 acres, and I said 1.5 miles long pretty much, so it is really quite large. Right now, we're a little bit over halfway done, and we expect to be 2/3 done by the end of 2014. This is the rendering clearly. What is completed right now is this half of Pier 6. We just put this in. This is all synthetic soccer fields. There's a little stripe of planting there. This is all for the future. We're building this right now. This is excitingly going to be a bird sanctuary. And this will be a meadow, a giant meadow. And then this is going to be all kinds of miscellaneous sports. This tiny little lawn exists, but nothing else here. These are hotels that are getting built. And then this is really, as I said, the flagship here of the park and where we're going to be focusing most of our attention today. This is Empire Fulton Ferry. Right here is where Jane's Carousel, a beautifully refurbished 1920s carousel, lives. It's gorgeous, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't include the slide of it underwater during Hurricane Sandy, although it's just fine now. It's amazing. Main Street here, this exists. This was actually built by the Parks Department years ago, and John Street will be building this in the future. It's unfunded as of yet. So it's a park in progress, and we're all really interested to see how it turns out. So this is Pier 1. As I said, it opened in 2010, so it's really only 3 years old, so keep that in mind as we go through. Although these shapes are so elegant, I think it's more than just pretty. What it is interesting topography, and I'll show you some close-ups of what's going on here. But because this pier is actually on cement, all the way down through the water, and the other piers are built on piles, these little wooden poles essentially. There's a limit to the weight-bearing capacity of any pier that's built on poles. Pier 1, we didn't have those restrictions, so this hill here is 23 feet above grade. So we could build these amazing topographies that then gave us microclimates, and that's really the important thing about all of this. And it also allows us to create different programming in different spaces. We use these lawns for lots of different events, and they have really different feels. And there are many native plants used, and we'll be focusing on those a lot. And while it's modern and elegant, and the design really looks nothing like this, which is how this exact area would have looked when the Dutch first arrived 400 years ago, the pier contains many of the same plants and plant communities that were originally there, and it is a far cry from this, which is Pier 1 when it was being used as a shipping container. So keep this image in your mind as well as we go through that, as we go through the talk. And it's, I think it's essentially an abandoned parking lot, right? And I like to think of our park as the world's largest green roof. So I'm going to take you through all of the fun ecological features of our park and all of the amazing habitat that we've been able to create. And you can follow along in the handouts. But why is it really important? I think that it is fascinating to me that this is what is going on. This is a walk along one of the paths on Pier 1. This is what we call sumac path. These are sumacs up here. And the fact that somebody in the middle of Brooklyn on what once was a shipping pier can have this kind of solo contemplative journey that is exploratory through a city is really, really important. And so it serves a critical role for people's connection to nature in that city. But it's also about many other animals. So this is one of two really scary slides in the presentation. This font up here was the scariest font I could find. It's called Feast of Flesh. And so I think reading a PowerPoint is tactless, but I just want to emphasize these. 1/3 of migratory birds are in serious decline. Monarch butterflies, that report came out last week, 49, or actually that's a typo, that's 59%. 59% they are down in 2002 from previous numbers. So, a great American
insect, and one of the most amazing stories ever, the monarch butterfly, are in serious trouble. Amphibians are going down. And urban populations all over the globe are just exploding. The New York Times thinks we might be in, and many scientists also believe that we're in the midst of the 6th major extinction. This is another really scary slide. So here, and this is from the New York Times, everything in red, these all represent different animal groups. Here are birds, here are mammals. So a full 13% of birds are threatened right now. A full 25% of mammals are threatened. And plants is just gigantic. So everything is in decline, right? Like essentially everything besides humans and all of those organisms that were smart enough to figure out ways to live with us are having a lot of trouble living on the planet with us. And it's very complicated why all of these things are happening, but one of the big reasons is habitat loss. One of the absolute most major reasons is habitat loss. So I'm from the School of Backyard Environmental Restoration. I think that if we can provide those kinds of habitats that these animals need in the small places that we have, we can be part of the solution. And if everybody teams up and does that, it can, really turn around some populations. And I'm going to go into specific ways that you can do that with specific plants and specific animals. This is the beginning of the to-do list. A wise person once told me that when you get to a new site, the first thing you should do is dig a hole. And I really agree with that. And the first thing, of course, you should do is assess the existing environment. So you want to look at, and on your personal property, you want to see what ecosystem you fit into. Are you essentially, if you have a backyard that's really shady, you're a forest understory ecosystem. If your front yard is really dry, you could perhaps have a meadow ecosystem or an alpine ecosystem. And then you can look at what kind of plants would happily live there and what kind of animals you could potentially support in that environment. That can be big and small. You can look at window boxes and stuff as well. This is how MVVA did their environmental assessment. And this stuff is just so cool. It doesn't probably have too much impact in your backyard. But this is a noise level map that they took these amazing readings, and you can see anything that's really red was really loud, because this is the BQE right here running right over the park. And anything that's yellow is really is not too loud. So they organized their big centers of gathering in places that were not too loud, and then they're constructing giant berms to block out the noise of the BQE. You can see the difference in noise between here and here. This is important from an environmental perspective because there's a lot of interesting research that's recently come out about how birds and crickets and all of these various animals will actually change their behavior because their method of communication has been deteriorated because everything is so very loud. The firm that designed the park also looked at wind, as I said, noise, they looked at sun, they looked at topography, they did all these really fantastic studies. They like to say that they let science dictate the design, and the park is a really elegant representation of that. So in addition to that, of course, if you want to be environmentally friendly, you want to use recycled materials whenever possible. All of this wood here was a great find for the park. We ripped down this giant warehouse that needed to be demolished, and we found that the entire thing was built with a wood of longleaf yellow pine. And this is a wood that used to be just absolutely everywhere. From North Carolina south down into Florida, it was these giant monocultures about 200 years ago. So much so, and it became so very popular that, of course, the entire thing was wiped out. It is very nearly extinct, but the wood is still incredibly valuable. So we were able to take advantage of that. This is one of the old longleaf yellow pine forests, and it would grow in these giant monocultures because it was so very filled with resin that it could withstand fire temperatures up to 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it burned out the competition, essentially. And the needles, while the bark was really could handle fire, the needles were actually flammable. So it was a very smart strategy by this tree, where it would coat the forest floor in flammable material and essentially ignite all the surrounding plant material and take over the area. But that resin that's in the wood made it also very resistant to decay. And we were able to, we have all these benches, all of this wood all over the park that does not need very much treatment at all. because it's actually 85% resin. It has more resin than any other wood on the entire planet. And I know someone who recently tried to take a saw to it, a bandsaw, and it was impossible. So it's really interesting stuff. We're really lucky to have it. This is the Willis Avenue Bridge, and we're in the middle of design when they said, hey, we're doing this renovation project. You need an incredible amount of granite. And the designers and the president of the park were very enthusiastic. They took all of this granite and they created this beautiful stairway called the Granite Promenade. And we have opera, we have poetry, we have stargazing, all these amazing things just as a result of communication and recycling of material. It's a really important feature of Pier 1. And the view, you can't see the view, of course, but the view is of the entire Manhattan skyline. It's really epic. Another reused material that we're very fortunate to have access to is the fill that came from the East Side Access Tunnel that the MTA was creating. This is this giant drill. If this was a person, they'd be about this high right here. And they're creating this tunnel to get very quickly into Manhattan and drilling into bedrock. And clearly everything that this drill is taking out is waste material. So they just put it in trucks, trucked it down the BQE, drove it onto Pier 1 and dumped it down on the ground. And that created all of these amazing topographical changes in the park. So we're very thankful for that as well, and happy to be able to reuse those materials. Of course, water collection and recirculation is critical in every garden, no matter how small. You should definitely think about ways that you can collect water from your roofs, in rain barrels, etc. Going forward, it's only going to get more important. We did it on a grand scale in our park. This is a water retention tank. It holds over 100,000 gallons of water, and it runs underneath. This is just the water retention tank for Pier 1. And it's even cooler than that amazing water retention tank is that all of the water of all of Pier 1 is designed to drain into a series of 5 wetland ecosystems. And the water drains from wetland to wetland to wetland and gets cleaned and then pumped back into that giant tank and then recirculated in our irrigation system. So it's not fully built out yet. We expect that when it is, we'll be able to get at least 85% of the water that we're going to need for irrigation from this system. And absolutely, when you're digging your hole to do your site assessment, you should really, really seriously be looking at the soil. Any landscape that is installed without properly assessing the soil is essentially just grafted onto the landscape instead of really integrated into it, and you will definitely run into problems down the road. We take soils very seriously. We have 7 different soil profiles that we've used in the park, and so this is one example. There's even a gravel layer beneath this. Hydrology is really complicated stuff, although very fun. And as each pier evolves, we've changed the soil profiles as well. And while the texture, the different types of sand, silt, and clay are critical, what's also really neat is the soil biology, which we monitor very, very closely, and we even encourage. So all of these tiny little organisms, your fungi, your ciliates, your amoeba, all of these really neat little organisms, all of the nutrients that your plants need to survive, these organisms essentially produce. So you can feed your plants synthetic fertilizers, which are actually salt-based and tend to kill off these organisms, or you can very actively encourage these organisms, and they will, if happy, produce all of the things that your plants could ever want, including your lawn, which I'll get to in a bit. And as I mentioned, choosing your ecosystems is really critical, and choosing what ecosystem you'd like to emulate. In our park, the way the designers did this was to look at which ecosystems would be appropriate and which sites, and they created these planting plans. You can see this is an open hedgerow, a dense hedgerow, a Connecticut grove. They had all these neat names and neat plant communities that they were using, and then created these beautiful maps for where those different plant communities would be throughout the park. And you can definitely do that in your home landscape as well. This is a map that we created at Pier 1 for public education. We do these fun plant guides and animal tours and all of that stuff, and this is essentially the way that the park is broken out. We have 3 big lawns. There. We have a wonderful salt marsh here. freshwater gardens. This is where all of the water drains all throughout all of those ponds. We have one meadow here, it's one of 5 meadows in the park, and then ornamental gardens here. So I'll just walk you through those different ecosystems. So these are the ornamental gardens. They're really, they're things that people want when they come to a park. They give people what they want, plants. Lots of evergreens, lots of flowering plants, fantastic fall color. Certain plants, there are definitely natives in there, but we even have some invasives like daylilies that we like to think are well contained and will not escape. This is a fantastic plant. This is Lindera glauca. It's an Asian spice bush, which is very closely related to our native spice bush, but it actually serves as the larval food source for the spice bush swallowtail. So even though this is an exotic plant, it's still capable of functioning ecologically the way that we use native plants. And then this is really the reason why I love my park so much. My background is in freshwater ecology, and this is one of our marshes. So this is our wetland, and it's just incredible. It's an incredible amount of work, as you can tell as well, but it's really such a unique ecosystem to be able to work in. As a plant nerd, you very rarely get access to real wetland plants, so to be able to work closely with these plants is such a luxury.
What was the white flower?
Oh, sure. That is Agritina altissima. It's a white snakeroot, and it is a very common weed, as a matter of fact. There are a lot of repurposed weeds in the park. You'll see cattails, sumac, and as we go forward, you'll see quite a few of them. And please, everybody ask questions and interrupt.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Have you had a spice bush swallowtail?
Oh yes, I will get into this section. Yeah, there's a whole butterfly section. Think about this. This is on a pier, right? That is amazing. This is in the middle of Brooklyn. And when you're in there in waders, there's some kind of primitive trigger where you're kind of checking your peripheral vision for alligators. It's just an amazing experience to have, and when you think about the context, it's even more amazing.
How deep is that?
It's 4 feet deep. At the deepest. And then this is another marsh on Pier 6. This is a much smaller marsh that's literally scaled for children, and it's exploratory. So the designers really considered allowing kids and adults as well to have those experiences of exploring a planted environment that all of us outside of the city are so fortunate to be able to have all the time. They tended to create those kinds of experiences in the city and in this once industrial environment. This is a salt marsh here. It is one grass. It is an amazing, amazing thing, and it literally acts as a filter for the river. This was a very common ecosystem before the coast was developed, and is now very rare, although ironically quite invasive on the west coast. And this grass is one of the plants that a lot of people are talking about being very important to plant around the edge of Manhattan and other cities, because this is the kind of planting that can actually attenuate storm damage. It's Spartina alterniflora. Smooth cordgrass is the common name. And it lives happily in salt, and it acts like a mangrove. So it lives in the salt, and then debris builds up, and then less salt-tolerant plants can move in and live on top of that. And it's literally the avant-garde of land, right? It moves out, and then land builds up behind it, and it moves out, and land builds up behind it. So these are just fantastic ecosystems. Of course, we're not going to let anything build up in there. It's sort of our little pet. It's interesting, right? It's really, I had a man describe the park to me recently as a menagerie of ecosystems, which is really what it is. We want them to perform certain ecological functions to a certain degree, and then after that we want to manage them as being our fun little pets. So it's a little bit more complicated than pure ecology. There's another great photo. Yes?
Is this anywhere near Dumbo?
Yes, this is exactly near Dumbo.
Because you mentioned the merry-go-round.
Yes.
And I've been there, so this is, Pier 1 is right there at Dumbo?
Exactly. Pier 1 is directly south of the bridge, and where you were was directly north. Yeah. This is just another shot of...
How do you get the salt water in there?
Oh, it comes in. I mean, this is the river, right?
So it's just...
So there's a little wall that, this is low tide. When there's high tide, the water comes up to here. When the flood happened, it was up to there. So it just flows in naturally. It's very, very elegant, and I just think I love this shot, these shapes, the way that they really frame the city is so elegant.
So the problem is keeping your freshwater wetland just fresh. Keep that
Uh,
salt from coming in there, right?
It was definitely underwater when we flushed it, and we are doing tests right now that seem to indicate that everything is okay. But going forward, of course, there are many things that we're worried about that we can't very easily test for as far as contaminants. So we don't know what's going to happen. Spring's going to be really, really interesting.
On that question,
Yes.
on that the previous photograph, what time of the year do you think that might have been?
Oh, midsummer. That's
Oh,
probably
okay.
midsummer. Yep. And then this is a meadow that I designed that very closely mimics the Hempstead Plains of Long Island. And I just keep putting these in everywhere because they're the most salt-tolerant plants you can possibly imagine. And this is one of 5 meadows in the park. We have these little pocket meadows that are really, really lovely, just incredibly low maintenance landscapes that are really, really ideal for being right on the water. What?
What plants?
Oh, well, let's see. This is a rattlesnake master right here. This is a great one. And this is, these were supposed to bloom together, but they did not. This is actually a very dry Long Island ecotype of a liatris. It's the prairie liatris, but it blooms much later than spicata. So don't get any ideas about having it bloom at the same time as your rattlesnake master. There's a lot of little blue stem in here, a lot of seaside goldenrod, baptisia, a really fantastic aster that now has an impronounceable name that I can never remember, but it used to be Aster ericoides. And I'll show some more photos of this throughout the season later in the talk. This is the same meadow, so obviously there was goldenrod, milkweed as well. I put milkweed in everything. And then of course lawns. From an ecological perspective, there's a big anti-lawn movement going on, to make you aware of it, and I think that's important. We have way too much unnecessary lawn, but the reality is that I'd like to say that a lawn is the ecosystem that brings the people, right? This is what people really go to a park for. And if you don't have a healthy lawn system, doesn't matter how many butterflies you have, nobody's going to be there to see them. I love to show this slide because this is the same lawn. And all these people who say that organic lawns are not possible just need to come and talk to me because we have 6,000 people on those lawns once a week, every week for the summer. And we've managed just fine. We have some of the best lawns in Brooklyn. And they're very compacted, but we do it. This is one of our earlier movies. We have the movie screen there, so I mean, if we can do it, so can you. It's definitely doable, and it's less expensive. And then this is one of our other very important ecosystems in the park. This is what we call the dense hedgerow. It's modeled on those hedgerows that farmers build between fields to mark lines. And when I first got there, I was horrified when I saw this. It just looks like a mess. And the traditional horticulturalist in me just wanted to make it fancy. And it did need help, and we helped it. But what I've learned since then is that this is actually a really important thing to have in your park when you're on bird migratory routes. Because birds, when they're looking for a place to nest and a place to forage, what they actually look for first is structure. They're not looking for your purple or red berries. They're looking for the shapes of the plants. They want to know if they can hide from birds. They want to know if they can nest there. They want to know about protection. They want to know certain birds, of course, want far more open spaces. So we have a very limited range of birds that we can attract here. We can't have all owls, unfortunately, although I really want them. So this is actually very important. So I think that going forward, developing the ornamental qualities